From Montana's news leader, this is the MTN 10 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. Billings voters have helped the city dig out of a $4 million hole with the passing of the public safety mill levy. With new money coming in, what can citizens expect? Q2's Mitch Leahy sat down with the city administrator to find out more.
In a 2-1 vote on Tuesday night, Billings voters overwhelmingly approved the public safety mill levy. Now, the city will gain an additional $4 million in the form of property taxes to go to fund police and firefighting services. But that money is only enough to keep those departments status quo. If the levy had failed, the city would have had to find ways to cut about $4.7 million from the 2021 budget.
This was really about retaining what we have. So the great news is we no longer have a $4.7 million deficit. That deficit is closer to $500,000, and that's manageable. So really our revenues are much, much closer to our operations expenses.
Now, the owner of a Billings home worth $100,000 will see a $27 increase per year on their property tax bill. And the owner of a $200,000 home will pay an additional $54 per year. An aspect of the levy that's better for the city is that the dollar figure brought in will increase over time as more people and businesses move in, thus increasing the tax base. Part of the reason for the initial $4 million deficit is that the city hired 20 full-time positions between 2017 and 2020. The positions were added throughout the police and fire departments along with 911 dispatch. The new levy allows the city not to make layoffs, but it doesn't provide any room for growth in public safety.
This avoids us going back to staffing levels, say, of 2016, 2017. And that's really great news because with not only our crime rates and response times, a challenge for us, all the demands for services are going up.
The Billings police and fire departments have seen calls for service nearly double since 2010, a trend that Kukulski suspects won't slow down. This means the city will likely bring another levy to voters sometime in the near future to look at expanding public safety services.
That's the kind of trend that we can't reverse on the same kind of status quo. We've got to figure out how to be more efficient, be more effective, and I'm going to be shocked if it's not going to require some additional resources in order to do that, well, as we are blessed with a growing community.
Kukulski said the city council could start to discuss another levy as early as this year. In Billings, Mitch Leahy, MTN News.
Thanks, Mitch. The city is now waiting on results from a statistical analysis on its public safety data. Once completed around the first of the year, it should help city leaders clearly identify places for future investment. Well, ballots are scheduled to be mailed about 3 weeks from now for Montana counties going to an all-mail format in the general election. Tonight, MTN Chief Political Reporter Mike Dennison takes a look at the security and procedures in place to verify and count those thousands of mailed ballots.
In 46 of Montana's 56 counties, ballots will be mailed to all registered voters on October 9th, along with absentee ballots in the other 10 counties, which will also have polling places open on Election Day. Soon after that October 9th date, mailed ballots whose postage is prepaid will start pouring back in to county election offices. That's when local election officials start the verification process for those ballots. They check the signature on the outer envelope to see if it matches up with the signature on that person's voter registration.
I think a lot of people get confused and think basically we're just checking, is this name the name that's signed? But there's a lot more to that. We're looking at the overall character of the signature, the slant, the way the letters are formed. We're looking for, if it's slightly different, is it an explainable difference?
If the signature doesn't seem to match, or if there is no signature, the voter is contacted by mail. For the ballot to count, the voter must provide the proper signature and ID. Many of these problems are resolved, but some are not. During the all-mail ballot primary election in June, less than 1% of returned ballots were not counted because of signature problems. Each envelope also has a unique barcode assigned to that specific registered voter. That tracks whether you voted and is another security step to prevent anyone from voting more than once. Once a ballot is verified, election workers open this outer envelope and take out the unmarked secrecy envelope, which contains the actual ballot. These envelopes are stored in a locked room until it's time to count the ballots. In larger counties, on the Thursday and Friday before the election, October 29th and 30th, election workers start opening these envelopes to unfold the ballots and prepare them for counting. The tabulation by machine starts on Monday, November 2nd, the day before Election Day. Most of the mail ballots are counted that day, but results aren't released until after 8 p.m. on Election Day. Cascade County Clerk and Recorder Rena Fontana Moore in Great Falls says this entire process is pretty much what county election officials have been doing for more than 2 decades when they count absentee ballots and local all-mail elections. County election administrators say the process is well vetted and that all-mail ballots this general election just means a bigger volume.
Most ballots cast in Montana elections, even polling place elections, are mail ballots. Even when we have polls open, most people have been voting absentee. So the system has been tested. It's been tested for years, and we haven't seen voter fraud happen through this system.
Missoula County Election Administrator Bradley Seaman said this election will be his county's 5th consecutive all-mail election. He says he's looking forward to it and to a record-high turnout, just like in the primary. There are 2 lawsuits filed by Republican Party groups and voters trying to block the all-mail election in Montana based on several grounds. A federal judge will hear those lawsuits next Tuesday. In the meantime, election officials in 46 counties are proceeding full steam ahead with plans for the all-mail election. Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Now, the counties that will still have polling places on Election Day are Mineral, Powell, Fergus, Stillwater, Carbon, Broadwater, Petroleum, Powder River, Treasure, and Webo. Well, starting this week, the state of Montana will post information online about positive COVID-19 cases in schools. Governor Bullock made the announcement at a news conference earlier today. Data will be provided in all K through 12 and higher education schools across the state, including private institutions. Schools' name, number of positive cases, and county it's located in will all be included. However, there will be no reporting on schools with fewer than 10 positive students to protect student privacy.
This is a system that protects student data in small schools while also providing a basic level of information and the transparency and the trust that parents in our community need.
The data will be reported every Wednesday on the Department of Public Health and Human Services website. State School Superintendent Elsie Arntzen disagreed with the move on social media, saying it would increase the risk of exposing personally identifiable medical information. Well, today the state reported one more death out of Rosebud County tied to COVID-19, plus 190 new active cases across the state. 82 of those cases were here in Yellowstone County. Now, along with the death, there are 7 new cases reported in Rosebud County, which now sits at 365. That's the second highest number of active cases in the entire state. There are about 2,100 active cases total in Montana. The statewide death toll stands at 141. And over in Wyoming, the state set a one-day record today of 128 new cases. According to the Wyoming Department of Health, the number of confirmed cases rose by a daily record of 104, while the probable case number increased by 24. The previous single-day high came back on August 14th with 67 confirmed cases. The state's 10-day average sits at just over 53 per day, which is also a record. Wyoming now sits at over 4,500 total cases with 46 deaths. Well, 2 people are behind bars tonight. That after a chase and shootout late last night on Billings South Side. 30-year-old Ryan Barnhart is facing felony charges, and his passenger, 21-year-old Gabriel Castro, is jailed on a previous arrest warrant. Just before midnight, a police officer saw Barnhart in a maroon truck exchanging gunfire with someone in a white passenger car. Police say Barnhart led them on a chase that reached 90 miles per hour before he crashed into a parked car at 5th Avenue South and South 34th Street. Police arrested Castro on the scene, located Barnhart hiding nearby, and say they later found a gun in the area of 5th and Broadwater. Turning to Chief Forecaster Bob McGuire now. And Bob, the west dealing with raging wildfires where there's, and then the south, they've got too much water.
Yeah, out here we don't have enough rain, and back down the south in the deep south it's too much rain because Hurricane Sally roared ashore last night near Gulf Shores, Alabama. It has a Category 2 with 105-mile-per-hour winds. It has so much wind that it caused this 18-wheeler to tip over. Oh, goodness. Yeah, and then the rain came after that, and it came down in bucket sheets, you name it. That's what it came down in parts of places like Pensacola, Florida. Florida, they had over 5 feet of rain. Parts of buildings were actually sheared off by the winds. That's how bad it was. And so that's what's happening down in the south. They're getting heavy rain, more tornadoes and things like that for the next 2 or 3 days. For us, we're looking for more smoke, and we'll talk about that coming up in a few more minutes.
Thank you, Bob. If you watched the CBS Evening News earlier tonight on Q2, you may have seen the story about a 19-year-old woman, a helicopter pilot, who joined this year to fight the wildfires in California. And that pilot is from right here in Billings. Here's Nora O'Donnell with her story.
Ashley Blaine is just a teenager, but she flies one of the largest helicopters, the nearly 50,000-pound CH-47 Chinook.
You could say it's the family trade. My dad's been flying fires for close to 30 years now. As soon as I got into flying, I knew that was going to be one of my end goals, was to get into firefighting.
Flying as her dad's co-pilot, Ashley makes sure the water they're carrying hits its target.
You have to be able to lean out the window, basically, and look at a water bucket underneath you and guide it where you want to go.
What is one of the biggest challenges flying a Chinook while trying to fight a fire?
Sometimes we can be flying in very adverse conditions, thick smoke or just lots of other aircraft working around us that we have to be cognizant of.
But for a young woman who's been flying since she was 13, it's a dream summer job.
I love what I do, especially getting to fly with my dad. That's one of the best parts.
Other than flying, what's the most important lesson you've learned from your father?
Oh, how to be a good person. He's a very compassionate and empathetic person, and he does his best to help out our local community and his friends. And that's something I really admire about him, is his willingness to help other people. And I think that's hopefully a trait that I can pick up from him and learn from him.
Nora O'Donnell, CBS News.
And Blaine is attending Rocky Mountain College here in Billings. Still ahead on tonight's MTN 10 o'clock news on Q2. Help's on the way for Montana ranchers hit hard by recent wildfires. We'll have the details in tonight's Montana Ag Report. And in sports, a lot of flags. Laurel won its season opener by 42, but it's back to the drawing board in one area, penalties. Scott will check in with the Locomotives coming up in just a bit.